What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Check the Kick. Sherdog.com is the website. I'm the host, Devin, and we are back with another episode. It might be about a year since I've been doing this for Sherdog. So, great time. I appreciate all the listeners. I am trying to do this as regularly on typically record on Mondays. It gets released on Tuesdays for you guys. So I appreciate all of you listeners. Thank you very much. Pretty interesting. I was going to say night of fights, but morning and early afternoon of fights. This weekend we had a PFL event that was real tough to watch. Outside of the Impa Kasanganai fight, he's always awesome. Dude went to the PFL, leaving the UFC, and has looked really, really good up at 205, just becoming like a violent knockout artist. Bellator, you can't even watch the Bellator card if you're an American if you didn't watch it live, because it's not like streaming anywhere. You have to go to a nefarious streaming site to watch it. But Jason Jackson lost his welterweight title. Maybe he can actually go to the UFC now, like he has spoke on in the past. We're going to talk about UFC Saudi Arabia to kick off the episode. First segment of the show, out with the old. UFC Saudi Arabia, Robert Whittaker. I mean, Robert Whittaker, I learned a lot of lessons this fight card. I got two of the three picks I talked to you guys about wrong, but I did say there was an opening for Volkov. I did say if Volkov can make it outside of the first round and stay at range and use his kicks, he could have success, and boy, did he, and we're going to talk about that. But Robert fucking Whittaker, I mean, he kind of deserves that moniker now. He is the middleweight BMF. The dude showed me, and I learned this weekend, one of the big lessons I learned, that current middleweights, like in the top 15 that held belts, are just very different than the rest of the division. Like, you've got, and you can rank them in whatever order you want, but you've got Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis, and Robert Whittaker, and then just everyone else. Like, they're if you had to rate them on a 1 to 10 scale, you'd probably say all of them are 8.5s through 10. But then the rest of that division is like 7s and below. And something could be possibly said about Jared Cannonier. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, what about Jared Cannonier? Well, even though I don't agree with the stoppage, he did just lose to Nasruddin Imavov, and he's 40, knee replacements. Like, it's just probably not there for him anymore. And then you're going to probably say, well, what about Nasruddin Imavov himself? Well, he's just not there yet. He hasn't shown us that he's there yet. And on like a one-day notice, Sean Strickland came and kind of easily beat up Nasruddin Imavov semi-recently. So, yeah. Real quick, before we talk about Robert Whittaker, I kind of just want to talk about the middleweight division. We got UFC 305 coming up, Adesanya versus du Plessis. Whittaker is a guy that doesn't seem to have a huge cut to 85. And he probably will show up and be a short notice replacement. Maybe he fights Sean Strickland as a co-main on that card. That'd be really cool. Strickland seems to be really beloved in Australia, and that's where he dethroned Izzy. So, maybe he has great fights in Australia. But, yeah, I mean, I learned that one thing I really learned is do not fuck with Robert Whittaker. Like, if you are just some schmuck, and I'm not calling Ikram Aliskerov some schmuck, even though that's what Robert Whittaker made him look like. But if you are just some guy that the UFC is trying to push up through the rankings, don't fight Robert Whittaker if you're that fighter. If you're listening to this, don't do it. It's not going to end well for you. Robert Whittaker looked great. Ikram might have... There's definitely some factors going into this. Like, Ikram He was matched with fucking Antonio Tricoli. To go from that dude, we saw him fight this weekend. To go from that to Robert Whittaker, what Robert Whittaker did to him is what we would have expected Ikram to do to Tricoli. Without a doubt. And Robert Whittaker just made it look easy. He found his timing right away, his timing and range right away, and that's something it usually takes him about a round to find. Like against Paulo Costa, it took him about a round to figure out Costa's range and find his own range and his own timing. Robert Whittaker's jab, just fucking lightning fast, comes from a weird angle. Ikram was trying to kind of feint some knees and maybe either draw out the jab of Whittaker to try to counter it, or just show him the need to, completely deflate that jab from his game. Didn't work. That straight cross, that 1-2, Robert Whittaker's ability to close a space, throw straight punches, and just enter the pocket with blistering speed and timing. I mean, she just looked incredible. The first 1-2 that wobbled Ikram and had Ikram doing the fucking chicken dance. He was just whoop, 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 whoop. Like, I mean, he like he had banana peels taped to the bottom of his feet. He was all over the place, kind of running in place, and then he goes and circles out. Whittaker throws a shot, and then he tries to wrap a head kick around the back of Ikram's head. Great for Ikram that didn't land. I mean, the knockout was still devastating, but I mean, that would have. Ikram tries to circle out. Robert Whittaker takes the inside angle, throws a beautiful uppercut straight through Ikram's guard. So, Ikram will kind of parry like this with that uppercut at an angle, just slid, boom, head like a Pez dispenser. He drops like a sack of potatoes. Fight's over, and it took him like a minute and a half. I don't have the exact time. You can go to the Sherdog website and find the exact time of the stoppage. I think it was like 1:49 or something like that. Yeah, and I don't think Whittaker would have done this to Chimaev, only because when Chimaev fights, he doesn't take the back foot against opponents in the first round. I'm assuming that the fight would have started and Hamza wouldn't have even done a hand touch, and then probably immediately shot for a big blast double or something, to just initiate the grappling and get right to it. Ikram doesn't really have that style. He's more of a, measure, keep his distance, and then let things go. He just didn't have the opportunity to do that against Whittaker. Whittaker's so tough. He was so fucking locked in. Good for Whittaker too, because Whittaker probably earned more money and seemingly won a much. I mean, he could have totally done this to Hamza. He's Robert Whittaker, but this is, you'd be lucky to have this type of win. Not lucky, but this is best case scenario regardless on who you're fighting, and you don't always get best case scenario, even if you are way overmatched. It's MMA, things are crazy. Shit, yeah, I mean, Ikram looked like he was an Antonio Tricoli. Like, he looked like he was just some random dude that the UFC ushered in to be slaughtered, and that kind of just isn't the case. Ikram's really good. He seems to be defensively porous when it comes to those uppercuts, though, and I mean, I don't want to say he's chinny, because he's only got 2 losses on his career, but they're both by pretty devastating knockout. It seems like when people can't put hands on him cleanly, it does really, just crush him. People are making comparisons to Abus Magomedov. Ikram's not Abus. Ikram is definitely better than Abus. He's not a front runner. Like, we've seen him go through the rounds and fights before, especially outside of the UFC. But maybe he could fight someone like Abus. Like, he definitely needs a step back and a comeback fight. We already talked about Robert Whittaker. I think he should probably just be a fill-in, as a backup, or fight Sean Strickland on that 305 card. But you don't, I mean, I know there's been talks of him like fighting like a Bo Nickel. That's just, he's Robert Whittaker. As much as I love Bo Nickel myself, that's way too soon for someone like Bo Nickel. he's lucky he didn't get stuck fighting that Robert Whittaker this past weekend. He would have been trouble for anyone in this whole division. Great fight, though. Shout out to Robert Whittaker. Came in, got some cash, got a performance bonus. I mean, probably got paid some extra money for what seemed like best outcome fight for him. And he got a trip to Saudi Arabia. He went over there, got treated like a king, and was the cherry on top of a pretty decent card. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Alexander Volkov defeating Sergei Pavlovich via unanimous decision, 2 30-27s and 1 29-28. Sorry, I had the recording pause. Should have took a sip of water in the pause portion there, but had to wet the whistle. Yeah, I don't really agree with that third round being scored for Pavlovich. This happens a lot in MMA, especially in scoring when we have one person that's like dominantly, clearly winning a round for like one round or maybe even 2 rounds in a row, and then the other party involved, does more shit, but like still kind of clearly lost. Like, yes, Sergei did better in the third round, but he did better than he did in rounds 1 and 2, but Volkov still won the third round like that. I mean, I don't know. I thought that was pretty clear. I was live scoring the whole event for Sherdog as well, and I scored a 30-27. I think we all did unanimously. Maybe those 129-28 in there as well. You can go to MMA decisions, find all the media scores on there, mine included. Yeah, Volkov looked great. I got the first fight wrong. I picked Ikram, and clearly I need to not underestimate Robert Whittaker. And here I need to also not underestimate Alexander Volkov. There's really only been 2 dudes that have finished him. And one was a very long time ago in Bellator. I think it was Sergei Karatanov. I need to go look at his record. And then Derek Lewis, after losing 2.95 rounds of a fight and coming back, by a hair and winning with seconds left via knockout. And I need to realize that Volkov's faced a lot of punchers. Like Tom Aspinall went out there and Kimura him, but he didn't go and knock his head off. He's fought a lot of dudes. Gon didn't knock his head off. And Pavlovich could not close the distance. It wasn't teeps. It was actually big body kicks that were really, really giving big crushing, just chopping kicks to the body. Were giving Pavlovich tons and tons of trouble. Volkov did fire some teeps. His jab was incredible, especially through like the second round and the third round. He was just eating Pavlovich alive with the jab, throwing some good crosses. Volkov isn't the fastest dude. I mean, it's heavyweight. He's like 7 feet tall. But he does a really good job of kind of like a poor man's version of what Sean Strickland does, where he'll kind of just parry out, put his arms out, and just deflect shots a little bit. But not a lot of, I mean, he was getting his hair combed in between rounds. Volkov with a little boy's haircut, getting his hair parted and combed in between rounds is absolutely hilarious. And the push in the end from Pavlovich, like Volkov just looks like he was, Volkov looks like he went for, a 2-3 mile jog. Pavlovich looked like he fought a 15-round boxing match. Like, you don't see people. I mean, I just can't recall someone getting eaten alive with a jab like that in quite some time in an MMA fight. I guess Sean Strickland kind of ate Israel Adesanya alive with the jab. But his face did not look like Pavlovich, and their skin tone's a little bit different. Pavlovich is very light-skinned and fair-colored, and it looked like someone had a fence post and was just wah, 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 just that looked terrible. Jabbing in the face with the fence post. The push at the end for me was just kind of super telling. Volkov said, and they seem to be buddies, and maybe it was more of a Volkov was they thought they were more buddies than I guess they really were. I don't know. But Pavlovich was just so angry and upset by the time the fight was over. He looked like shit. The jab just ate him alive. His face was so red. He was bloody. Both his I hate to see the way he looks. He posted today. He said, kind of surprised he's not apologizing to Volkov because they said they were friends or whatever. That was just a shitty like the push after the fight. Like Volkov came to say what's up. Pavlovich pushed him. Like, just a kind of like a upset teenager. He just, I don't know. The loss was probably pretty demoralizing, honestly, to lose that way, where you just can't do what you like to do. Like you don't have the ability to close the distance and incite a brawl and win. And this is now the third time in a row where a fighter in the heavyweight division has come at Sergei Pavlovich with a technical game and a technical game plan. And for lack of better terms, fucked him up. His intro into the UFC when he fought Overeem hit him with a very tactful grappling game. Absolutely fucking crushed him. Tom Aspinall hit him with a technical in-fight boxing game where he, kept his distance and counterpunched him and sniped him when Pavlovich entered the pocket and hit him with a clean shot and finished him. Volkov just had a very technical game plan that he stuck to and fought a outside kickboxing match. And when you go and have brawls with people and you're as durable and you hit as hard as Sergei Pavlovich and you got dudes that are willing to brawl at heavyweight, probably 7.5 times out of 10, you're going to fucking win that, which are really good odds for just brawling at heavyweight. He's fucking destroyed everyone that's brawled with him. But anyone that's hit him with a technical game plan and that hasn't been too shook up by his power has really flummoxed him. I don't know if he had an issue going for. He tried to, right when he started to wrestle in that third round, I knew he was done. I knew he had given up on himself. If a guy like Sergei Pavlovich starts resorting to wrestling, a dude that fucking killed everyone all the way up to an interim title fight and then got knocked out by trying to go out there and just kill someone, starts to wrestle, that kind of, for me personally, is a big tell of where he's at with his personal confidence in the fight. He didn't seem confident up at that point, and clearly by the end, he was extremely flummoxed, pushing Volkov around. Great performance for Volkov. I think he is going to be ranked like number 3 in the world. He called out John Jones. That's not going to happen because John Jones, there's like a 70% chance he's never going to fight MMA again, and he's just going to hold the title for no reason and face no recourse for holding up the division because he's John Jones, or he's going to fight Stipe, win, lose, or draw, more than likely win, then walk away. And I think it's also tactful that Jones is just like, hey, Stipe, you're old, but the longer I hold this belt and the longer we postpone this fight, just the older you're going to get. Like if your knees are fucked now, they're just going to be even more fucked in 8 months. You're going to be 42 instead of 41 or however old he is. So Volkov, I think he should fight. And it just depends on what happens. If it's a really, really close fight and Blades wins, for example, I could totally see them booking a rematch. If one person absolutely cooks the other one, I could see Volkov fighting the winner or the loser of that for an interim title fight. And I'm not here telling everyone that Volkov needs to fight for a title, but like it's kind of deserving. Look what he just did. He's on a good run. He was 5. He beat number 3. John Jones is only going to fight one dude at heavyweight. And Volkov wants to fight. Even though Cyril Gane beat him and kind of beat him pretty bad, Cyril Gane wants to shoot like movies and shit. Volkov takes his training seriously. He's improving. He wants to be an active fighter. And I'm sure that the UFC would probably rather him fight for an interim title at this point than Gane, just because Gane's unreliability and unwillingness to fight. Pavlovich, give him Gelton Almeida. Let's see if he can do the same thing that Curtis Blades did. Last fight we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about Volkan Oezdemir absolutely flattening Johnny Walker. This is one I got right, and it went exactly like I said it would. If you listen to the show and you follow my picks, you're going to be right 33% of the time. That's a joke. Number one, MMA is a volatile fucking sport, and this is why, but also just like MMA gambling and picking fights in general, it's just, there's so much volatility. crazy fence grabs, points being taken, points not being taken. There's just so many different variables to handicapping MMA fights. You just kind of have to go off of your gut and tape study, and yeah, it's hard. It's difficult. But this one just seems so obvious. It's like Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker, the way I can explain him is like, in the Middle East, those like shitty trucks that they drive with the 50 caliber guns strapped to them. Like, yeah, it's a really shitty truck, but it's got a 50 cal and they got like 5,000 rounds of ammunition. So yeah, it's a 50 cal. It's strapped to a real shitty truck, but like it's a fucking 50 cal machine gun. Well, Johnny Walker used to be that really shitty piece of shit truck that's like probably leaking oil, brakes aren't working, lights definitely don't work, but there's a 50 cal strapped to it. Like that was Johnny Walker. But what happened to him when he went to SPG is like now he's just a shitty truck. Like they took the gun off and they like replaced it with like a super soaker. Like, yeah, it's still a gun. It's a water gun now, and it's strapped to this really shitty truck that we got to put a quart of oil in every time we drive it. Yeah, Johnny Walker looked bad, and he's looked bad ever. He's always been bad. Like he's never been good. And SPG Ireland stripped him of all the things that helped him be a successful MMA fighter. I'm not going to say good, but they're telling him to slow down and be calm. And it's like, do you not know who the fuck Johnny Walker is? He's 6'6". He has an 82-inch reach. He probably walks around at like, he's in cage at like 240, 245. He doesn't, number one, he doesn't have enough water in his brain to fight this slow, technical game. He doesn't have the like you're not teaching him any defense. So he doesn't have any defensive game at all. Number one. Number two, he's cutting so much weight that he has no durability to fight this weird, slow, technical game. Number three, he's not technical enough to fight a technical game. Like they just, it's like, do you not know who Johnny Walker is? You need to be having him go out there and get on the front foot and throw crazy strikes at people and get people flustered and hit him with some big fucking athletic shit. Like, have you never seen that jump knee that Johnny Walker throws? He can jump like 7 feet in the air and throw a jump knee, but you're taking that away. He's got one thing: being huge, athletic, and fucking explosive. And you guys took that from him. So now what does he have? He's the shitty truck with no 50 cal on it anymore. It's just, he doesn't know how to cut angles. He doesn't know how to counterpunch. He doesn't know how to counterpunch off the back foot at all. He doesn't know how to throw off the back foot. So if like you just have a high guard and you just pressure him and throw big shots at him and you just keep on the pressure, like it's going to look like the Corey Anderson fight. It's going to look like the Jamal Hill fight. It's going to look like this fight. Volkan looked really good. But I mean, like a squirrel could have fought this game plan. Like just walk forward. Don't let him take the front foot at all. Don't let him land any leg kicks and just bash him. There was a moment where, in my opinion, the moment that started all this was a big hook to the body where Walker went, ooh, he kind of reacted to it like he always does. Then he tries to play things off, like the same thing with the first Ankalaev fight, where like he'll play things off like it doesn't hurt him, but like that's how you know it hurt him, where it caused him to reset. Volkan Oezdemir hurt him up top, and then just finished him with a blow of punches. The final like uppercut that he hit him with was really reminiscent of the Rockhold Romero, the Romero over Rockhold finish, where it was just kind of like someone was throwing a fucking bowling ball. Crushed Walker. I mean, you could have just picked him up and laid him in a casket. He looked like, if you know anything, if you ever seen first Lord of the Rings movie, at the end of the movie, they put Boromir in a canoe and they send him on his way. And that's literally exactly how Walker was laid there. It looked like he was about to go down a water slide. Feel bad for Walker in a way because like he's I hate to say stuff like this, but like, clearly he's not a smart man. And maybe he is, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, he doesn't carry himself as an intellectual, I'll say. Like his caveman stuff with his brother, all those videos. And yeah, I just, I don't want to say he's being taken advantage of at SBG Ireland, but like there's no way even his coaches are watching this and thinking this is good. Like you've stripped him of you like you took the fangs off of a rattlesnake. He's not a fucking rattlesnake anymore. I don't know what to say. I kind of feel for him though. He came out in the pre-fight. He's like, I got to win this fight. I got a newborn baby. And then just yesterday, he posted on his Instagrams, I'm okay, everyone. Thank you to my team. He's like holding this baby. And he's like, I don't know what happened. And it's like, yeah, dude, you're cutting 40 pounds. You don't have any water in your brain. You're taking way too much damage. You're already chinny. Like, look at that fight off the regional scene where he gets knocked out like 3 times. Johnny Walker needs to be retooled. He needs to leave SBG Ireland. These are all my opinions. But he needs to be retooled, needs to leave SBG Ireland and probably go to like heavyweight. Like, dude, just show up at like 255, 240. You love being big and ripped, but like go do jumping knee stuff to like fat heavyweights. Like he should have been fighting. They're not around anymore, but like he should have been fighting like the Chase Shermans and, Jake Collier, Kate Collier and stuff like that. Like those are the dudes Walker should have been fighting at heavyweight. Parker Porters, him and Chris Dalkhouse would have been fun, but like all those dudes are gone now. And like he could have been fighting those dudes. I've talked more about Walker just because like the win, Volkan Oezdemir just went out there and executed a perfect game plan. The most obvious one, in my opinion, in my eyes at that time. But when a guy continuously gets finished like this, and it's such a, Looney Tunes ass finish, you kind of got to be concerned. That wraps up UFC Saudi Arabia. That also wraps up the first segment of the show, Out with the Old. We're going to, real quick, middle segment of the show, What's Hot? Won't be long. We're going to talk about Turkey Aliskerov and the sports washing. This is air quotes, sports washing of combat sports from the Saudis. And I just want to know, like, your guys' opinion. Put it in the comments. Let me know. Here's my handle right there. Hit me up on social media and tell me what you guys think about the Saudis and their, again, air quotes, sports washing of what they've done with combat sports. Turkey Aliskerov stated that he wants to purchase all the boxing organizations and make something like the UFC. Him and Dana were doing an interview after the card ended, and Dana's like, yeah, we're going to come back with Power Slap. Turkey's like, you're going to come back with 2 events, Dana. You're coming back with 2 Power Slap events. And Turkey's like, we put 12,000 people in here. We want to put 30,000 people in here. We want a pay-per-view. I don't know how much Dana loves like traveling to Saudi Arabia and like dealing. I personally get the vibe that Dana doesn't love doing business in that part of the world. Like he talked a lot about Fight Island, but I don't think he likes getting on those planes. I don't know if he likes dealing with them in general. I think he, there's a lot of money in the Middle East. These people have so much money. They're known for some, for lack of better terms, potentially shady business stuff. But Dana knows that they can, inject a fuck ton of money into the UFC and into combat sports. I try to turn a blind eye on the political part of what certain people are known for. But like if the Saudi government and Turkey Aliskerov are ready to just inject hundreds of $1 million into the UFC and into combat sports so we can get fights like, look at all the fights that have just happened overseas, and there's so many more to come. They're in talks with dudes like David Benavidez. They're, they've just done so much. Look what they've done with Usyk and Fury. Look what they did with Ngannou Joshua, Ngannou Fury. They're dumping so much money. Saudi government's doing events in boxing in the US. I'm sure that's going to happen here too. Maybe we get something in the Sphere in 2025. Maybe this is how Dana is helping fund the Sphere. I don't know. But it's potentially concerning with the sports washing thing. But at this point, the UFC, it's going to be a lot easier for the Saudi government to just swoop in and take over a sport like boxing than it would be MMA, just because the powerhead of MMA is the UFC, and they just do business so differently. But if it can help these fighters make more money, make the product better and all that stuff, great. If it can help the UFC like get off ESPN Plus, there's talks of like the UFC like moving over to Netflix for a potential streaming service. If that's the case, I would just fucking delete ESPN Plus altogether. Just this past weekend during the broadcast, during the show, the broadcast went like black, just completely black, or showing like the middle of the cage, and like there's always issues with like PFL's product, but that's just PFL. Like that's to be expected because they're subpar in my opinion. But the UFC is the best product, and it's not the UFC. It's ESPN Plus. Just so many issues. If you're listening to this, I bet you've had a problem with ESPN Plus watching the fights. There's been times where ESPN during pay-per-views has crashed, and I've had to resort to going to other places to watch the fight, and those other places can show the fight, but ESPN Plus can't. That's a fucking problem. So maybe that can help if the Saudis can, inject some money. Maybe they'll go to like Amazon, like One or something like that. I don't know. But when there's more money in the game, that leaves more room for possibilities, fighters to make more money, us to get a better product. So I'm not mad about it, but tell me what you guys think. Moving on to the final segment of the show, we're going to talk about UFC 303. This is headlined by a rematch of supposed to be Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, but we've got Alex Pereira fighting Jiri Prochazka in the main event. I'm going to talk about 3 fights, final segment of the show. And with the new, we're going to talk about 2 guys that are in the welterweight division that I am not extremely excited about. But I think it's more of just a personality thing and not as a skill of a fighter that they are. But we're going to talk about skill of a fighter that they are. That makes no sense. Skills as fighters that they have. We've got MVP taking on Ian Garry in a kind of interesting booking, but it also makes tons of sense, and it'll definitely add some juice to this card. Odds on this fight, we have Ian Garry as the slight favorite, about -135. MVP coming back at +115. MVP, longtime Bellator talent, kind of tons of viral moments. The Chris Cyborg jump knee, or the Cyborg Santos, jump knee with a skull flattening thing and kind of scaring his opponent into submission in one fight. Tons of interesting, super flashy striking from him. Really incredible athlete, incredible talent. Older guy, second fight in the UFC. Ian Garry, 26 years old. Coming off of a couple good wins, that head kick knockout of D-Rod. We just saw D-Rod back this weekend. After that, he had that pretty close fight with Jeff Neal. He's a guy that's faced a lot of hate on social media. Some people don't understand why. I kind of get it. Just, you can't talk shit to people, and then it's like having a little brother that hits you, and then you hit him back, and then he goes to tell mom. Like, he just has that type of mentality, that type of thing going on where he just, I don't know. But he, like, you talk shit to people and then they talk shit back to him and then he's the victim. And it's like, dude, come on. Don't talk shit to people and then disable your comment section on social media. Like, don't talk shit about someone and then not show up to the press conferences. If you're going to talk shit, it's just not a good look when you pull out of fights, whatever. But he has looked good. MVP also looked really good against Kevin Holland. I was wrong there in that fight. I picked Kevin Holland, but he was completely stymied by MVP's ability to be all the way outside beyond kicking range and to leap in incredibly fast and counter you whenever you're leaping in to try to close the distance, hit you with something really hard, and then just get the fuck out of there. And that's something that MVP is really good at. He is an incredible athlete. The UFC is full of tons of athletes, but MVP, late 30s, he's just like a once-in-a-lifetime type dude. the dude's ability to close the distance, pick shots, his shot selection is incredible. His speed is incredible. You know, it's too bad that he didn't come to the UFC much sooner in his career, because it would have been a make or break moment, and he could be even better because he might have been forced to be even better as a fighter. But the same way that like Anderson Silva made Forrest Griffin look, or Stephan Bonner, like he has the ability to make dudes and look like that at welterweight in 2024. Like he's that good. He's that quick. He has some wrestling deficiencies. He has shown that, but you know, he does also have weird submissions on his record as well. In this fight, I'm going to give a quick breakdown here. In this fight, I could totally see, and Ian Garry is a pretty good wrestler, and that's where MVP is deficient. I could totally see him leaning on his wrestling and trying to out grapple MVP, pushing him against the cage. Ian Garry can be a good wrestler. His problem though is he stands straight up and down, and he's extremely hittable. And he likes to kind of fight in a similar way that MVP does, where he'll want to try to, you know, jump into the pocket, and he's got that Darren Till thing where they leap straight into the pocket, straight up and down with the head on the center line, and try to come in and land big 1-2s. But MVP is just set up to counter dudes like that because he's just so fast and his timing is so impeccable. Not a volume guy. Doesn't need to be. If Ian Garry had 2, 3, 4 losses on his record, I'd be a lot more prone to pick him because he'd probably just be able to humble himself. But he's such a cocky kid. I could totally see him going out there and trying to outstrike MVP. And then by the time the third round happens, you know, it's too late. If he has a Song Kenan moment where he got absolutely fucking sparked by Song Kenan, that could be so much worse if he's stuck with someone like MVP. And I just haven't seen him fully dial in his striking defense. I know he's down in Florida at a good camp, and I know he's been down in Brazil at a good camp. Even though at Shooto Box they don't have any emphasis on defensive striking. But I'm gonna pick MVP as a slight upset here, and I could be totally wrong. And this is gonna be a showcase bout for either one of these guys. If MVP, and I think what the UFC is doing is the UFC thinks Ian Garry is going to win this, and I think the UFC wants Ian Garry to win this, but I think also too, you know, their plan B ain't so bad. But give me MVP to win a 3-round decision where he hurts Ian Garry a couple times and wins on points. He's going to hurt him in 2 of the 3 rounds, and in the round that he doesn't hurt him, Gary's going to win, and the 2 rounds that he hurts Garry, and he's going to win. That's what I think is going to happen. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Brian T. City Ortega taking on Diego Lopes. Odds on this fight: Diego Lopes is the slight favorite, -126 favorite. Brian Ortega is about +110 dog. You can find him up at 115 even at some places, and Diego Lopes all the way up at like 145, -145 at some places. This fight was kind of just put together. Brian Ortega had mentioned that he was working on moving up to 155, and there was a name in place. And to me, that means that he was either looking to fight Charles Oliveira or fight Max Holloway for the BMF at 155. And he said he can't say the name because that's still a possibility, which makes me think it could be Max. But hell, you never know. Him and Charles Oliveira would be really fun. Diego Lopes is a guy that is just fucking surging through the rankings. The UFC seems to love him. You see it if you watch any Ultimate Fighter. He's on Ultimate Fighter. He is the epitome of being a company guy. Came up on short notice, had a fucking hell of a fight with Movsar Evloev. Almost finished him with multiple submissions in that fight. Buzzed him on the feet as well. And is just getting really favorable not favorable matchups. They're not matches that, you know, he should win, but they're favorable as far as advancing him in the rankings. The way he looked against Sodiq Yusuff, that uppercut he hit him with, my God. Diego Lopes is an extremely potent athlete. He's really, really fast. He has decent striking, but great hand speed and really good power. And he's fearless. Really good opportunistic BJJ. Brian Ortega, on the other hand, we all know who T-City is. This is a dude that has, I mean, he was worse than a nuts and bolts striker. Look at his fights with like Clay Guida and stuff like that, where he it's Renato Moicano clearly losing, and then pulls a rabbit out of the hat. Since then, he's become a much better striker. Look at his fight with Korean Zombie after taking a long time off, and then the second fight with Yair Rodriguez, where the first one ended via injury, and he came back and won the second one after still losing. He came back and almost won the first round of that second fight, and his striking has just come along. He's so damn tough. Another guy that's got incredibly high level BJJ, one of the fastest and best back takers in the game. He is not like a take you down slowly, methodically, get into half guard and then go from half guard to side guard and then go into full mount and then slowly chip away. Like he's not that type of controlling grappler. The dude is fast. If he takes you down, he's jumping on it right away. He's looking for position and submission back to back right away. He's not some slow stalling guy. He doesn't want to secure a position before he moves to the next one. He'd rather just go. He's just going from A to Z. Boom. He's getting there right away. Both of them are incredible athletes. I would give the BJJ advantage to probably T-City, but I think Diego Lopes would be able to hold his own. I'm going to give the speed and the striking advantage maybe to Diego Lopes, but I think striking, they're probably equal. I just think Diego Lopes probably hits a little harder and he's a little bit faster. Such a tough fight to pick, though. I mean, you look at Diego Lopes fights with like Pat Sabatini, how he just threw him around, and this could be a passing of the torch moment, even though Ortega is the underdog. But it could also be one of those things like this past weekend with Ikram and Robert Whittaker. Like, we know who the Brian Ortega is. We're not sure who Diego Lopes is yet. He lost against Movsar Evloev in a close fight, but he lost that fight. And Evloev's not the champ. Evloev is great. He could keep up with the champ in a fight, I'd say. And he's on that level. But, we just don't know. He's going from Sadiq up to here. And there's a pretty big difference between belt holders, title challengers, and then the rest of the division. And that Sadiq, unfortunately, is the rest of the division. I don't come into these shows with the fights pre-picked. I talk about them. I do my tape study. I do my research, and I talk about the fight. And then after I've spoke about both fighters, I give you guys my pick right in the moment. My heart says Diego Lopes, but my mind says T-City. But I'm going to go with Diego Lopes. I think he's going to... Brian Ortega just has too many defensive holes. I could totally see Diego Lopes trying to hurt him, getting overzealous and getting guillotined. That's something that Ortega does. Like the dude jumps guard in 2024, and I'm not like ready to throw my TV. But I just think Diego in a 3-round fight, there's not enough room for opportunity for Ortega's opportunistic, crazy game. And there's also not enough time. Over 5 rounds, I might pick Ortega just because that gives him more opportunities to do stuff. But sorry, if Diego Lopes goes out there and wins, if he could win the first round like a 10-8, win the second round, and then Ortega looks for a finish and Diego survives, I could totally see him winning the first 2 rounds. I could totally see him getting like a 10-8 round one. Ortega's a slow starter. Look at all of his recent fights. Give me Diego Lopes by decision in a crazy barn burner of a fight. Moving on to the main event of UFC 303, we have the short notice fight. Real quick, I just read that Roy Jones Jr.'s son has passed away, so my condolences to him, his family, and you can go read about it. I don't want to talk about it because it sounds shitty. Just shitty thing to deal with. Main event, we've got Alex Pereira fighting Jiri Prochazka in the rematch. It's so funny that Conor McGregor pulled out of this fight with a broken toe, but Alex Pereira probably still has broken toes, and replaced John Jones and fought Jamal Hill with broken toes and knocked him the fuck out. seemingly hit Jamal Hill so hard that he's been turned into one of the fans' most hated fighters. Um, this fight is a rematch booking from April. Um, Pretty great fight. Jiri also fought Alexander Rakic and won via knockout on that card as well. Was it UFC 299? This is a really tough fight to call, even though one dude won via knockout. Sorry, I need to give you guys the odds. That is not professional of me. Odds on this fight: Alex Pereira is a pretty decent favorite, minus 150, minus 160. I see him all the way up at 180 at, at some sports books. Jiri coming back at about plus 130 and plus 140 is the best you can find him. And this fight is really interesting. Their first fight was pretty close. Jiri had a lot of success with his weird unorthodox boxing and strikes, got a takedown in there. It's funny, if you watching the tape, like Alex had like a high elbow guillotine at one point, like semi almost locked in. But he was like freaking crushing Jiri with the leg kicks, knocking him off of his feet. And even if you look at Jiri's last fight with Rakic, he was getting his legs kicked to shit. Jiri he's got 30 wins, 26 finishes. Is he knocking out the best guys in the world? No, but I mean, he was once he got into the UFC. He started knocking out the best guys in the world. Prior to the UFC, no, but it translated over. So that's great. We saw last fight that Alex can be touched up, but man, his left hook is just seemingly such a deadly punch. It just hurts and kills everybody. Alex Pereira, for a guy that's got like 12 MMA fights, he's got 10 wins, 2 losses. He's got 12 pro MMA fights, but the dude's just fought like every person he's fought like in the UFC at like heavyweights, like held the belt. It's funny. He's just not being slow rolled, for lack of better terms. He doesn't have this like crazy Muhammad Mokaev type like amateur MMA career. He did most of his fighting in kickboxing. Actually came to combat sports a little bit later in life, but he's an absolute killer. He is really good at setting up his shots. He is a fearless puncher in the pocket, knows that he's the harder puncher, and has always been the harder puncher in the pocket. Walk down his foes. He's got really good jump knees, incredible kicks, really, really good leg kicks. He kind of looks like he just flicks them out, but they do so much damage. And his left hook, like his lead hand, is just so deadly. He'll jab to the body, and then come boom, hooking with kind of almost a shovel hook up top. The way he just bonked Jamal Hill. What's crazy is like he's got all these incredible knockouts in the UFC, and he hasn't even like landed like a chef's kiss, like impeccable clean shot. They're all like these weird deflecting shots, and they still kill people. He's got good ground and pound and incredible finishing instinct, like the way he followed Jamal Hill to the ground and hit him with those hammer fists. Not a good wrestler at all, but against the cage, he's very willing to do those downward Travis Brown elbows. That's kind of how he finished Prochazka. Jiri is just an absolute wild man. I mean, the way he fights is like he fights like a Beyblade. I don't know another way to describe it. Like you just pull it and he just spins and goes and he bashes into everything. He's just so willing to rely on his incredible durability, even though he did get knocked out against Prochazka. But like, look at the fight, or against Pereira, but look at the fight against Rakic. Rakic was beating the fuck out of him until he wasn't. And then all of a sudden the tides turned and Rakic is just drowning. And he gets knocked the fuck out for it. I would say Jiri is probably actually the more durable guy. Alex does seem to be a dude that does get wobbled by punches. Like Izzy, finished him off, hurt him real bad in their third fight, but first MMA fight. Hurt him real bad. And Jiri just seems to be made of, I don't know what, but the punching power and the defensive lapses. If you look at their last 2 fights, like both of them won via knockout. One dude just went out there and punched the guy really hard and he died. And the other dude literally had to go through a firestorm to win. And all of Yuri's fights are absolute firestorms. Like, look at all of his UFC fights. He hasn't had a clean win in the UFC. All of his fights are these crazy tooth and nail battles where he's almost getting finished. He's almost getting rocked. Like, he got hurt a ton against Oezdemir. He got hurt a ton against Reyes. He admitted to being knocked out on top of Reyes. You know, got fucking the fight with Glover. Like, just an incredible back and forth battle, getting busted up on the feet by Glover. You know, and he got busted up by freaking Rakic a ton, even though he won. Like, he's winning these fights, but man, another man would be losing them. His mental fortitude is just incredible. He doesn't check any leg kicks, and that's going to be such a huge problem here. I think he may come and wrestle. He looks a little bit slimmer, and he had been talking about a couple weeks ago, he was talking about preparing for a fight. It could have been this one, but he also was talking about going to middleweight. He seems to be carrying less weight in this fight. I don't know what that means, but Alex Pereira has been sparring with this professional 6'6" boxer with like a 21-0 record. I just watched a video of him a little bit ago. He's training ahead of this fight. He looks to be, I mean, short notice, but Pereira looks like he's put on more muscle. I just watched him hitting pads with Pilino Cruz, his head coach, one of his head coaches, kind of fat guy. He just looks so big. You just can't. If these dudes fight 10 times, I'm going to pick Alex Pereira to win 70% of the time, and 30, and none of them go to decision. They all end by knockout, you know. 7 times I'm picking Pereira to finish Jiri, and then the other 3 times I'm picking Jiri to finish Pereira. The crazy thing is, you know, even at minus 1,000 odds, there's still a chance the underdog wins. You know, even if it's 1 out of 100, it could just happen on the first out of 100. Could happen on the 10th fight. It could happen, you know. So this weekend, I don't know. You know, is it going to be the 1 of 7 or is it going to be the 1 of 3? I'm not sure. But my pick is going to be Alex Pereira. Jiri hasn't changed, and he needs to clean up his defense. Could he go out there and just hurt Alex with something crazy and then finish him? Absolutely. But he is just way too willing to take damage. He doesn't check the kicks. He's way too defensively porous. And what's going to happen is I think he's going to get his legs kicked to bits, and that's going to force him to press the action, and he's just going to get hit with something again. And if he tries to be slow on the back foot, Alex Pereira is just going to go take the front foot on him, and it's going to look like the second or the fourth Izzy fight, the second MMA fight where he's just raining hellfire on Izzy, but just without getting caught, because Jiri is not a crafty back foot counterpuncher. Jiri just takes too much damage. He's way too willing to take said damage, and I just can't trust a guy like that against such a once-in-a-lifetime power puncher. Like, the dude's the number 1 pound-for-pound puncher. He's just deadly. Like, it's more deadly. It's like the only other dude I can think of is Francis. It's like more deadly than Derek Lewis, because Derek Lewis, you know, he has long fights with people where he hits them more than once. Like, Alex Pereira's hitting people once and they're dead. Give me Alex Pereira. I'm gonna pick first round knockout. I think Jiri might go for it even harder, and I think the harder Jiri goes for it, just the more trouble he gets into. That's the show, guys. Really good fights coming up this weekend. I wish I could talk about the whole card. Peyton Talbot's back. Some good fights on the undercard that I kind of care about. That Andre Fili Cub Swanson fight's a good one. Charles Jourdain versus Gene Silva. Joe Pfeiffer's back. Yeah, there's some pretty good fights on this card. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Hit me up on my socials. Like, follow, subscribe to Sherdog, comment on this. I'll interact with you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'm the host, Devin, and enjoy the fights.